Welcome to Breaking Sales, a podcast dedicated to helping you have tough, meaningful, and rewarding conversations with your prospects and clients. In meaningful, what we mean is these are the conversations you truly feel like you are the prospect or client's conversational peer. There's no anxiousness or uncertainty holding you back. You feel a sense of calm and confidence in asking the tough questions. You're not thrown off by the bad news, and you expect the prospect to think about and invest into the conversation as much as you do. On Breaking Sales, we use the filter of psychology and innate human behavior to deconstruct the many misleading sales approaches that actually work against your efforts to build trust and close the business. Let's get started. I've learned over the years that giving and receiving feedback is a gift. The art of giving it takes some courage and awareness. Courage because you truly never know how your feedback will be received and what the consequences to that relationship could be. Awareness because you have to slow down and you have to assess the intent of your feedback and place yourself in the shoes of the recipient. Today, Pam and I are tackling both sides of feedback, why most people avoid giving it, and why the people you choose to receive feedback from says a lot about who you are, where you are in your journey. Whether you're navigating feedback with prospects, teammates, clients, your kids, or even your spouse, this episode will give you some tactics and tools to help you deliver your thoughts and observations in a way that builds trust and lands with the recipient. Let's get started. Pam, I want to talk about feedback.
Okay, one of my favorite subjects.
We've talked about the importance in the past about receiving feedback. I want to talk about the importance of giving feedback. I just came off of a whole series of opportunities to coach and give feedback to individuals. So I think that's why it's fresh on my mind.
That makes sense.
And I also know, though, giving feedback is very difficult for lots of people for a multitude of reasons, whether it's they innately have a little bit more passivity and they're not assertive, which can be a very big challenge for many folks where they know what they want to say or they know what they want to ask, but they hold themselves back because they don't have that assertiveness. At the same time, the people pleaser mentality can also be very difficult to give feedback, or stuck in that friend zone can be very difficult to give feedback. So when I say the word feedback, what comes to mind?
I think for me, receiving it always comes to mind before giving it. I can tell you I've been given feedback that sometimes the way I give feedback is very poor. And so when I dig into that and ask more questions about why, I've learned that when giving feedback, you have to do it in a way that you are creating a safe place for the person to be able to respond. And sometimes, Dan, I haven't been the best at doing that. And I think sometimes too, it's held me back from giving feedback if I don't feel like I'm creating an appropriate environment to give somebody feedback. But I'm very direct when it comes to giving feedback. I don't beat around the bush when it comes to giving feedback. And while I can appreciate the fact that sometimes I've got to be better at those things, I also know it's part of my job to be able to coach people to receive feedback in a manner that they can get it in whatever way it's presented to them, if that makes sense. So I think it's this difficult kind of overall process of how you give it, how you receive it. Do you ask for it? Do you create environments that allow people to give you feedback with regularity? How do you practice giving feedback? I mean, you could go down so many rabbit holes on the subject of feedback, but I can tell you, I've been told many times I don't do it well.
That's a hard one to assess, right? Because feedback is we have to overcome our own challenges in giving it. And then we have no control on how the recipient receives it. And, when I think about feedback, though, it's so important. So I think about feedback. I think about, as a dad, how do I meet my kids where they are and give them feedback that maybe I can catch them at the right time where it might resonate with them, right? When I think about it as a husband, that's a tough one. Giving my spouse feedback, there are times I may bail on that one and I don't give it, which might be the more judicious decision.
For sure.
But I think about it not just as coaches, which it can be very difficult sometimes giving feedback, but even like to prospects and clients. And so the rule of thumb that I try to always follow now, and I do want to come back to something you said, but the rule of thumb I try to follow is the benevolence, the high intent. I have now learned through trial and many, many an error that if my feedback is coming from a really, truly authentic, benevolent place where I know the observation I'm going to make or the feedback that I'm going to give or whatever it might be to the other individual really, truly serves them. In a way, it might even protect them in a way from making the same mistake again or continuing a behavior or whatever it might be that they're doing. If I truly feel like it's absolutely in their best interest, I've noticed I'll work hard at making sure I deliver it. That helps me. I remind myself, look, I can't necessarily, it may not be in this conversation, or it might be, or maybe it's in a different conversation. I need to find a way to give this person this feedback in a way that they can accept, hopefully, and learn from it. Because I do want to protect them from doing what they're doing again. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes complete sense.
Not the easiest thing to do. So the first thing I usually do when I give it is I'll come out with premise and I'll say, listen, are you okay if I share something?
That's what I've been trying to do too.
And I will say, are you okay if I share something? Now, what I may share, it might be a little tough to hear at first, but I'm doing it to help. Like I will just come out and just be just very transparent about why I'm going to give the feedback that I'm going to give.
I think that's a great best practice for any of us. Ask permission and give the premise that it might not be the most comfortable thing to hear.
I mean, if I run the gamut here, I can think of giving feedback recently to one of my children, and I was very careful. I said, are you okay if I make this observation? And they were like, yeah. And I could just see the body language change and the arms crossed. They sat back in the chair. Oh, they absolutely did. I mean, thank you, Albert Mehrabian, right? 1960s, University of California. How we communicate as human beings is 55% body language, 38% demeanor and tone, right? Because no words were spoken, but I knew exactly how my child was feeling in that moment when I said, do you mind if I make an observation? So then I noticed it. And I said, listen, I can tell right now in your body language, you're not sure. So I go, why don't I hold off? We can pick a different time and maybe we talk about it then. And that's when my child was like, no, it's okay. I want to hear it. And they got a little bit more comfortable, but I went in for a third time and I said, are you sure? Remember, I'm your dad. I'm doing this because I care. I'm not doing this to upset you. And at that point, I saw a little bit lighter body language. And so I decided to give the feedback.
Why do you think, Dan, if there's one thing I've noticed, you and I were both raised in sales environments. And from day one, we were taught, get ready. You're going to get it and you're going to get a lot of it, to the point where you actually start craving it as you become a more self-aware person. Why all of a sudden have we become a group that shies away from feedback? What plays into that?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I know, like, depends on the age bracket, right? I mean, right, you have Generation Z, you have millennials, right? Gen X, right? Baby boomers. What's the new one now? I don't even remember. But my gut is a little bit of the social media has something to do with it. Now, I am hypothesizing. I get it. But right, if you look at social media, it's all about how to look perfect, how to talk perfect, how to act perfect, right? It's all scripted. Everything on it is almost scripted. And so I think that there's this idea of perfectionism out there that's truly unattainable. But unfortunately, for I think some of the younger generations, it's so hardwired and hard bedded into them that feedback can be just devastating to them because it goes against the grain of everything they've seen on social media. Now, that is a Dan Lappin hypothesis. If I ask you the same question, how would you answer?
I think part of what you're saying is absolutely accurate. I think maybe there is a delineation between my desire to be a high performer and whether or not my behaviors actually indicate that's what I want. And I think feedback has a lot to do with that. You know, I was challenged early on in my sales career. You say you want to be really good at this, but your actions don't necessarily reflect it when it comes to feedback. And I want to be the type of person that asks for it often because I know it means I'm a more self-aware person. I don't want people afraid to give me feedback. And I want to be the type of person that can deliver it in a way, to your point, that the person knows, like, if you desire to become a high performer, it's necessary. So I also want to try to destigmatize the need to have to like create such an environment where everybody always has to feel good about it. You know, Dan, I almost think like,
That environment, Pam. And
it's hard.
to our listeners, and I know most of our listeners know this. I mean, you want to be in an environment where you're going to get feedback. If you're triggered by feedback, that's on you. That's a you issue. I remember some of the hardest feedback, and I've gotten a lot of it in my day. Two stories briefly, but they were incredible. So I really, over the years, have tried to fine-tune, Pam, as you know, my skill set around questions and being someone who's really good at asking questions. And for those of you who know me, you know I work really hard at it. I remember, I don't know how many decades ago now, but early in my sales career, I got really tough feedback where I came out of a meeting and my boss looked at me and literally said, "What the hell did you do in there?" I go, "What do you mean? I worked my butt off. I got a meeting with the COO of this law firm. I brought you in. We got a chance to share our value proposition and all that." And it was raining out, and I'll never forget it. His name's Walter. Walter looked at me, and it was a gift. And he goes, "That was one of the worst meetings I've ever been a part of. Don't ever bring me on a meeting like that again. You didn't ask a single question. You wasted his time and our time." And Walter's an awesome guy. And at the moment, yeah, I wanted to crawl into a hole. But that feedback stuck with me. And no matter what, I may not have wanted to hear it, but Walter was spot on. It was some of the best feedback I'd ever gotten.
Well, and I think too, you know, when I was younger, if somebody like a Walter had given me feedback, I think this is probably what I would have said. Well, that's his opinion. But I can find somebody that doesn't feel that way. And I do think, Dan, like, part of it is like identifying the people who you want to be able to receive feedback from, because you know that they're good at their craft. They can see around corners. They can identify your blind spots. So I think part of me too, early on, probably avoided hearing feedback from the people I needed to hear it from, sought it out from the people that I could easily say, "I don't care what Walter thinks. He doesn't do this every day." Like, it's amazing how I would manipulate my ability to get feedback based on that.
What's funny too is, and I'll give another example to our listeners, is that it can sometimes come from the person you least expect it to. So I remember when I was struggling to get my business, Lapa 180, up and running many moons ago, a mentor of mine at the time who I very much looked up to, very much so, his opinion counted. It did. It's like probably 18 years ago. And there was this one moment where he just looked at me. This was over, I think it was a glass of wine, if I remember right. And he goes, Dan, sometimes you just got to think about maybe you're just not cut out for what you're trying to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. You gave it a shot, and maybe it didn't work, but maybe it's just not for you. And I remember looking at him, I'm like, well, what do you mean? And I could just feel my chest start to tighten, right, on the hair on the back of because I was like, what do you mean? I'm giving this all I got. He goes, I think there's a possibility, Dan. And I remember he said this. He goes, to be a good coach, you might be too nice of a guy. And to be in sales, you might be too nice of a guy. And I just remember sitting there going, oh my, this guy just crushed my entire world. But I remember leaving, and I kept thinking about it. And I'm like, I'm not too nice of a guy. And that's not true. So what it did is it helped me become more self-aware of which Dan is showing up. Which Dan am I choosing to bring into this interaction, into this experience?
Well, and that's why I think, too, being very good about the environments you choose to put yourself in so you can get feedback from folks like that. And you know my story, Dan. I decided to start working for a very demanding person. And I will never forget one of the first times we were giving a presentation. I was in charge, and he shredded me after the meeting. He said, I don't know why I need you if all you're going to do is put PowerPoint slides up and read from them. One of the first things out of your mouth was, there's a lot on the slide, but let me walk you through it. It was unbelievable. And it's so funny because one of my coworkers is like, this is why nobody wants to work for him. You just experienced it. And I thought, son of a gun. Okay. I remember sharing with Jeff that this was going to be a defining moment for me on whether or not I could thrive in an environment where somebody's expectations were higher than my own, or if I was going to continue to find ways to make excuses for the feedback I was getting from folks like him.
Or the feedback from your environment in general.
Yep.
I like the thought process, Pam, of you get to make a decision. Do you use the feedback to rise to the occasion and challenge yourself? Because it's not about the other person being right or wrong. It's not about you being right or wrong. Is there any value in what that person shared? And can you take anything from that? Is it a chance for you to look in the mirror and get better and to improve yourself? Feedback, receiving it, you can turn it into a very much a positive game. You can make it very selfish, which is, I'm going to use this. I'm going to take this and use this to my advantage. Right?
Yes. And I think that, like taking stock, who do I ask for feedback and why? Do I ever ask anybody for feedback? I did find myself asking people that I knew would tell me what I wanted to hear, or asking people that I could easily rationalize and justify if I didn't like the feedback, why I didn't like the feedback. And so it was a very defining moment for me when I'm like, you know what? Enough's enough. This is what you need. You don't surround yourself with enough people like him who have much higher expectations than you do, like it or not. And if this is where you're going to go, you have to get used to this. Dan, he got to the point where he'd be like, I have to give you feedback and I need you not to cry. because it's not personal. And I'm like, gosh, I know I get so emotional. And it took me a long time. We've talked about that before. It's a muscle. It took me a long time to get to that place. And I think too, that's why sometimes I try not to sugarcoat my feedback. I try to be very matter of fact when I give feedback, because I know that's just a part we have to get out of there, is the emotional piece. It is observations designed to help you remove blind spots and get better. That's all it is. It's nothing more. It's nothing more.
Yeah.
So you'll like this, Dan. I kicked off a client in October, and it's a C-suite. I'm coaching a C-suite, CEO, CFO, general counsel, CHRO, CIO. It's all C-suite people. It was one of the most positive tension in a very productive way that I've ever been in a long time. All they wanted to do was what we call our hot seat role plays. 2 people in the front of the room dissecting a conversation and role playing it. And it was amazing. The CEO said, we're all big boys and girls, and we're here to get better. So that's the premise for today. And you're not going to shy away from giving feedback on these role plays. And it was amazing. And it was, wow, Dan, that was really bad. You should probably go sit down and let somebody else have a turn. My goodness. And it was like, we laughed. We were like, yeah, okay. Like, you're right. I probably don't do this. And I didn't do that. It was so refreshingly healthy. It was just so healthy. Everybody received it. Everybody took something from it. We didn't try to defend ourselves. We didn't get upset. It was just so healthy. And I just remember thinking, what a dynamic woman for being able to create a culture where everybody can sit in a room for 6 hours like that and give relentless amount of feedback on all kinds of subjects. And everybody felt good about it. Like, that's the world I want to live in.
So for our listeners, you really need to prepare yourself first on giving the feedback. You are doing the other person a great favor. You got to remember that. If you're going to give feedback on an observation of something they do, how they act, a situation they were in, remember, not giving the feedback, you're not going to give that person a chance to fix it. You're not going to give that person a chance to get better. By giving the feedback, you're setting a path for them to go down. Now, at the end of the day, it's their choice. That's the first thing. And the second thing I thought about, Pam, as you were talking, which is, right, you got to have an agreement of some kind. Like earlier in our conversation, I talked about the agreement I was trying to make with one of my children about, are you okay if I give feedback? Are you okay if I share an observation? And I waited and I watched and I decided, do I need to ask again? Do I need to make sure? Do I need to pull away on it? Do I need to put it to the side of the table for now? So you also have to use this idea of premise to set up the feedback and remind people, don't ever take it for granted, but remind people you're giving it because you care. You're giving it because you want to help. And you can be as humble as you want about it. There are plenty of times I might say to someone, look, I am not good at this myself. I struggle in this area as well. It's not a strength. So I'll align myself with someone when I give certain feedback, telling them I'm in the boat too. I get it. And then I'll give the feedback. But as teammates, right?
Teammates.
That's huge.
It was huge. It was inspiring. Sometimes, Dan, as a coach, you're not the most popular person in the room for those reasons. And finally, I'm like, oh, people are willing to give feedback, and it's coming from such a healthy place. I also think we shy away from giving feedback because we think, oh yeah, somebody, I'm looking for something wrong. And It's just not the case. I don't know where that comes from too, Dan, but I hear that too. Like, it's almost like, well, you're looking for something wrong. You're looking to see where I'm failing. And it's like, no.
Let me add one thing here for our listeners, because I just thought about this, and it's really, really important. I've had to work through this, and it's an ongoing process. It is human nature to judge. When I want to give feedback, I have to make sure I am judgment-free. That's key. Because people know when they're being judged, even if you don't say it. So what I'll do, and I don't remember where I heard this, and I wish I could give the person credit for it, because I would right now if I could, but I heard this great rule of thumb, right? Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said now? Does it need to be said by me?
Ooh, Dan. Well, that's the takeaway of the day. I love that.
So I always think through, does this need to be said? Most of the time it might be a yes. Does it need to be said now? Could be a yes, could be a no. Then it's a data point for later. Does it need to be said by me? And I don't rush to that third one. So that helps me remove the judgment piece. I mean, because again, none of us want to judge. We don't mean to. It's a negative experience, right? It's a negative interaction or a reaction that we have to something. So I understand none of us want us to judge, but we do innately. And so if we need to take a step back, right, it's really important to have a little process to slow ourselves down so that we can decide to hold off on the feedback and use it as a data point with a child, with a friend, with a teammate, with a prospect, or with a client later down the line. Now, notice how I didn't include spouse in that one, because either way, feedback to a spouse is you're
Never
in
a good
trouble.
time.
Yeah, never a good time. So, all right, for our listeners, we covered feedback, and listen, it's so important as a top performer, as a leader, as a teammate, in sales, as a parent, whatever it might be, friend, you name it. You owe it to others around you to learn how to give it. You make them better, you make yourself better, you make the relationship better. Think about the last time someone gave you feedback that genuinely changed your trajectory. Chances are it wasn't easy to hear in the moment, but the person who delivered it cared enough about your success to risk their own discomfort. When you give someone feedback, you're doing them a favor. You're giving them information they can't get anywhere else. You're creating a path for them to improve something they may not even realize needs improving. But you have to set it up properly. Make sure that they know why you're giving the feedback. Ask permission before you dive in. Watch their body language to gauge whether they're actually ready to hear it or whether you need to pull back and maybe try again later. And remember, the stronger your intent to help, the more meaningful and direct your feedback can be. People want to know that you're on their side, and that's why you've chosen to share your observations and thoughts. The truth is, you owe it to the people around you to help them see what they can't see for themselves. It's not often comfortable, but it's necessary. Thanks for tuning in.